Good to see all of you. As you can tell, a lot of good news in that passage that Mariah just well read for us, and then some difficulty as we get into the really difficult sections of Romans. Let me start with this tonight. I know a story of a man and his wife who pulled up. Anybody ever pulled up to like a place and they were washing windshields to raise money? And so some young kids ran out at this car and they began to clean his windshield, and this man was rather obstinate. I don't know if anybody knows anybody that's obstinate like this, but he didn't think it was cleaned quite well enough, and so he said, "I'm not giving you any money until you do that again." So the kids diligently, man, they've got this trip they're trying to make, and so they want to raise this money really bad, and so they get back to work, and they're trying to get that windshield absolutely spotless, and he goes, "Hey, listen, maybe you don't understand. I can't see through the windshield well enough. You're going to have to do it again." They try it again. The third time he's so obstinate, we think he's about to go to jail. Anybody know anybody like that? Nobody can get anything right? So finally his wife reaches over, snatches his glasses off his head, cleans his glasses, hands them back to him. See, because he was looking through the wrong set of lens. The kids had the windshield perfectly clean. My goal for you tonight is that you would see through a new set of lens, not one that's fogged up by the world or one that's not even the right perspective for you. God can clean the lens in which you're looking through and make the book of Romans. That's really what the book of Romans does for us. We see Rome, at the time that Paul is writing this letter, was the city of the day. Basically, the whole world ran through Rome. But there was no good to the city. It brought no health. Let me give you an example of that. It was the commerce capital of the world. All the world's money and finance ran through Rome. But at the time of the Paul, there was not one hospital in the city. There was not one orphanage in the city, even though there were hundreds of orphans because Rome was constantly at war. There was no health. There was no hope. The sick and weak were discarded. There was a powerful military. There was lots of wealth, much opulence, but no love, no care, no true community. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the word hedonism, but it described the day. It was just a lustful beast that fed a person well if that person was strong or if they were just depraved and crazy enough to get by. Darwinism way before Darwin. It wiped out the weak. It wiped out the oppressed. It actually caused depression and oppression and with slavery and war. Massive amount of intelligence, full of sensual splendor, art, but not full of life, because there was nothing that was sustaining. It was only for the moment. Hedonism maybe like no other time, no other place. I paint that picture for you because that's the context in which these 8 churches are trying to form together and with the help of Paul bring a different message. And so as Adam finished our sermon last week, he finished with this verse 15, that says this. It says, Paul said, "So I am eager." Now I want you to think about the kind of impetus the Spirit had to be putting into Paul for him to say into that culture that would be completely resistant to anything having to do with the gospel because it had no need. Didn't think it had any need. Doesn't sound familiar, does it? "I am eager to preach the gospel to you also who are in Rome." And then he continues this week, verse 16. "For I am not ashamed of the gospel, for it is the power, as powerful as you are, it is the power." In the Greek, the word dynamis. It is the power of God for salvation to everyone who believes, to the Jew first, and now to you, Rome, to the Greek. For it is the righteousness of God revealed from faith for faith, from faith For faith, sola fide, as it is written, the righteous shall live by faith. That's amazing. He just comes and says there is no power here, that the power of the gospel, the dynamis in Greek. By the way, that root word for dynamis there, you might be hearing something like dynamic or dynamite, power, action, authority, things move, things change. But what is this gospel of which Paul speaks of that is power? I want you to picture this. You're in a hospital. The doctor has been in the room with your family. You don't know it, though, because you're in a coma. The doctor has just informed the family, your family, that your organs are shutting down. Probably not going to live through the night. Some of us have been in those rooms and seen that end coming near. It just feels hopeless. But at 4 a.m., a resident comes in your room and finds you sitting up asking for ESPN, asking for food, asking for the stuff that you enjoy. You have, and the resident begins to check you out, and there's good news. Your body is no longer shutting down. As a matter of fact, he can't find anything wrong with you. It's completely healthy. So healthy to the point that you'll probably be released the next. You know, can't relate to this, can you, Wayne? Right? What was certain death is now certain life. Power. So you might, that family standing next to you might have wanted that for you, but anybody ever felt like this? You're just powerless. There's nothing you can do to stop that train from rolling. And then you realize there's powers bigger than what we know. And it was not because of anything a human did. And because of that, joy came in the morning. See, that's miraculous. That's miraculous regeneration. That is a physical metaphor. That is a story. That is a figurative language story that represents what in reality happens for us. Except you have to understand that in our spirit, we are not born in a coma. We are born spiritually dead. And remain dead until a similar regeneration, a similar miracle happens for us. The message of Jesus' sinless life, his death for our forgiveness, and his defeat of death in the resurrection. That dynamis, what Paul just said to us is that dynamis, the power of that message is what sparks and takes a stark death to life. That's joy-filled good news. It is that message is the power of salvation. So my question for you is, why would we ever be ashamed of good news? Paul says, for I am not ashamed of the gospel. Why would we ever be ashamed of such a good news? Sometimes it's potentially because we may have rejected it. The reality is because of the changing power of the gospel, it is not good news for everyone. Because with its preaching comes rejection. People hate change. Our sin nature hates change. Excuse me, preacher, I love my sin. Thank you very much. I love my pride. I love where I am. I love it more than your message. And then part of our sin nature is that we hate rejection. And so because once in a while somebody might look back at us and go, listen, your message is not doing anything for me. As a matter of fact, you need to shut up. We just get blatantly rejected. And fear of rejection often defines us. And then we all have a story, right? We all have a story of the church here in the Midwest, and much of the Midwestern church is not dynamis, but it's dynamite. Most of the people that you encounter that you would like to give the gospel to walk around with limbs blown off. But with the filling of the Spirit, we can see Paul, we can agree with Paul and see this power as more dynamic, change to good than dynamite. See, most of those people that have their limbs blown off were not ready for the message of the gospel. Therefore, they were not listening. They were still in a coma. They were still dead, and therefore rejection. And sometimes that rejection feels violent, so they feel like they've been damaged. And then sometimes the church has just been damaging because it walked around with a dynamis that wasn't very loving and didn't match up with what Paul's trying to do here. But that filling of the Spirit, with that filling of the Spirit, we can become like Paul and see this power as something that we want to continue to preach. We must never be ashamed. Here's why we must never be ashamed. Our culture needs us. The reason Paul says, I'm eager to preach to the Romans, is the culture needed him. The culture needed his message. And I'm just going to be blunt with you. Ours needs this message too. Because I can't remember a time in my 58 years on this earth that our culture has been so negative. Some of you are sitting here tonight kind of as a product of all that negative. There's few conversations anymore without a fight. Social media has ramped that up. And I'll just be honest with you, our culture has gotten to where you can't have a serious conversation without hurting somebody's feelings. Got terms for it even. Hey man, you got to stop putting me on blast. Anybody ever said that? You need to stop saying that. I'm just calling that out. Like sometimes a loving rebuke or a loving conversation or even just some advice, those stark answers say, don't ever bring me anything. Don't ever bring me a message of hope. Don't ever bring, even if it's in love, don't bring me a message of change. That put me on blast is just passive aggressive, for leave me alone. See, our world, the U.S., without common grace is Rome. And let me just put it this way. In a world without spiritual hospitals, the church has the only words of life. And so if me bringing words of life to you puts you on blast and you bring that back in a strong sense of rejection, I may not bring it again. Just out of my sense of fear of rejection, if nothing else. The church has the only words of life. But how does this happen? How does salvation come through such a simple message? Well, the answer is in verse 17. For it is the righteousness of God revealed from faith for faith. It is written, the righteous live by faith. God's righteousness in the person of Jesus is revealed to us. It's actually gifted to us. And let me just tell you a sign of how you know that righteousness has come to you. When somebody says to you, I believe this area of your life is sitting outside the righteousness of God, the spirit that is inside of you would say, thank you. I didn't know it. I didn't see it. My self-awareness could not see that, and so thank you. Thank you for pointing that out to me. See, that would be repentance against our culture, which says, don't ever bring anything to me. And when we get back to that, when we can have civil discourse, when there can be a loving rebuke received with humility and not pride, we'll have a good clue that God's righteousness has actually been revealed to us, actually gifted to us. Because see, this is a radical, heavenly righteousness. See, Jesus never sinned, and so he didn't receive rebukes. But the Spirit that lived him and the righteousness that lived in him would have received it well. So as we become Christ-like, that humility comes along. And it must be a heavenly righteousness, because one small taint of sin and we cannot be in the presence of God. So to be saved, we must have a righteousness, a heavenly one gifted to us. That's the good news of Jesus. So you're sitting here tonight. I'm not sure why you're sitting here tonight, but let me tell you why you should be sitting here tonight. Because you had more than a small taint of sin. And he lived a life that you could not live. In other words, he had no taint of sin. None. Never once. Not one little small bit. He lived a life we cannot live. He took a death that should have been ours. You know, I don't talk about this a whole lot around you guys, but you need to hear this. Like, the Old Testament describes it like this. I think it's in Isaiah 64 that the Father crushed the Son. Everybody says, oh, the Jews killed Jesus or the Romans killed Jesus. No, God the Father took out all his wrath against sin, against an innocent man who lived a life that we couldn't live, and took the wrath of God. That's what this whole book is about, is that we had a taint of sin that separated us from God, got us kicked out, and Jesus said, I will live that life for you, and I will die the death that you should die for that wrath. The anger of God against sin. And then Jesus was raised to prove that he was qualified. You know, he didn't stay dead. He could have claimed that this was qualified me, I live sinless, and then they killed me, and this is for your forgiveness, so believe in me. But if he was still in the tomb, that would all be a moot point. There would be no separation from every other world leader. You know, every other religion in the world has been led by somebody that is worm meat in this moment. That'll be fun on the internet. Just went back on some list maybe I'd gotten off of at some point. They're dust. You know where Jesus is? He's alive in his physical body. Nail holes in his hands. Physical. Sitting somewhere right next to God the Father Almighty in heaven, waiting to return in a physical form. That should stir us. That should stir us. Does anything stir us? Does it stir us? It should stir us. He is not dead. Let me sum that whole description of that gospel up for you from 2 Corinthians, another writing of Paul. For our sake, he made him, Jesus. The Father made him, Jesus, to be sin. He never sinned, but he made him to be sin. Who knew no sin, so that in him, Jesus, we might become the righteousness of God. What is righteousness? Well, God is righteous. Completely holy, because he has no sin in him. How do we sum that up around here? We say he always does what is good, right, and perfect. Is that you? No, then you need Jesus. It's not me either. That's the standard. See, it's not your neighbor. The plumb line is not your neighbor. The standard is not your neighbor. Well, I'm a little bit better than him. I'm a little bit better than her. That's not the standard. Are you better than Jesus? That's the standard. Not pretty good. Not fairly good. Not usually good. Always good. Always right. Always perfect. See, when we trust Christ, here's the amazing thing of the gospel is that perfection gets gifted to you. Why do we encourage you to be a high-level worshiper? Submitted to him, not submitted to yourself. That righteousness will come out. It will come out in surprising ways. People should start to say, you're really different. Even though we continue to sin because it is Jesus' righteousness in us, so listen to this, If you took your last breath in this moment, if you're a believer in Jesus, you get to hang out with Daddy. You get to hang out with God the Father in the next moment, because it's Jesus' righteousness that gets you past those flaming swords into the presence. Yes? And it's not a human righteousness. We'll find out in Romans here over the next few chapters, there is no such thing. True righteousness must come from God, and this righteousness is revealed by faith. Let me repeat verse 17 for you, this statement. The righteous shall live by faith. Sola fide, faith alone. That's faith that God gives us. Even that's a gift from him. Everybody goes, yeah, boy, I believe, man. Look at me. No. Even God gave you the faith that you have, because there's nothing good in you. Well, faith in what? Well, in Christ alone. All the solas fit together. Solus Christus, Christ alone. Let me describe it to you this way. In 1544, Martin Luther had been distraught because of his failings at being righteous. He saw all these demands of God about righteousness, and he is depressed, he's discouraged, he's distressed because he could not self-generate goodness. And so I don't know if any of you have ever had this experience before. Martin Luther would spend hours upon in the day so worried about righteousness and his inability to perform it on his own that he would lay face down on the floor for hours of the day, praying to God that there would be something come about that would make him righteous. Actually, what he was doing also, he was isolating himself so he wouldn't sin. Problem was, he had a sinful mind, and so he's sinning while he's laying there trying to isolate himself. Frustration upon frustration upon frustration. But then he discovered in the book of Romans, on a trip to Rome, of all places, on the Lateran staircase in Rome, where people were trying to attain a human righteousness with money and by crawling up some steps. Anybody ever seen the movie Luther? If you haven't seen it, you might not be a Christian. That's a joke. But please go watch the movie Luther so you see this human failed attempt at righteousness of these people on this staircase trying to crawl their way up, money in hand, to purchase and self-effort themselves to righteousness. So he packed up in that moment, went back to Wittenberg, and honestly began to preach the correct gospel. And the world was reformed. It's called the Reformation. Life came to millions through a simple message, that the sole requirement was faith in the one who has righteousness. What's his name? Jesus. Jesus. If you're not ashamed of the gospel, that word should fly off your lips, because there's nothing else. There's nowhere else to go for that righteousness. He's the only one. But to understand good news, we must get a handle on bad news. To understand our belief, we must understand our unbelief. And that's where we're going to be heading here in the next few verses of Romans. So we're going to be spending the next few weeks on those verses deeply studying what humans bring to the table. And the start tonight was a little dark, right? That's going to feel dark. However, it will also explain why people do the things that they do. I hear people say all the time, I don't understand this place, man. Why are people so mean to each other? Why are there wars? Why is it, we've got a bunch of our sons live on the west side of Chicago, and every day Billy Jackson or Sean Harrington or one of my kids writes, there were 20 people killed in my neighborhood last night. We don't have that experience here. They are living that, and they're asking that question, what is going on? Why is it so crazy? Why is it so dark? Why is there war? Why is there violence? Why is there gossip? Why do people want to hurt each other? Well, even Martin Luther, like if we stopped with just the previous story, we would herald Martin Luther as this phenomenal dude, right? We would be trying to make him into some kind of hero, some kind of saint above other saints unless we read the whole story, where he also had a dark side to his heart that caused him to imprison and even abuse folks who disagreed with him. So before we put some kind of crown on his head, let's make sure we talk about the whole story, that he wrestled with sin and depression and difficult language and all kinds of difficult actions, as important as his life was, until he died. He reformed, here's the way I put it, he reformed the third church theologically, but he was never quite able to let Christ completely reform his heart. Positionally before God, I'm sure he's in heaven right now, but there was remnant anger and remnant pride that came out in hurting people. Without grace, that's just who we are. Dark. And the darkness is the danger of expository preaching, right? We can't skip this stuff. We want the whole picture. We want the whole package. And some of you will struggle to make it through today because you want a more positive message. Well, seeing darkness it is so that you can see light as it is, I think, is an extremely positive message, not a false one. We have metaphors for it here, right? We want to see the beauty of Jesus? Set him up against a dark cloth. He's a diamond up against a dark cloth. We talk about this metaphor all the time. Why would we want another one? We want to see the beauty of Jesus. So we have to set him up against the dark cloth. That's what Paul is doing with this beginnings of this letter. Which begs a common question about darkness. You may have asked this question before. What about people who've never heard about Jesus? You ever asked that question before? You ever had anybody ask you that question? What do we do with them? There's places in the world, unreached people groups. What happens with people who've never heard about Jesus? How do they find light in the darkness? What happens to them? Well, my theology is way too sharpened, and so I travel to places where there's unreached people groups. East Arnold. But when I'm in places that are truly unreached people groups, I find funerals really sad. I'll be in the streets of India somewhere or something like that, and here'll come a funeral procession of some kind, and I'll get really, really sad because there's a really good chance that not only did that person never believe in Jesus, they may never have heard the actual good news of Jesus. They might have heard of Jesus, but not the gospel story. And because my theology is sharpened, I know that the ignorance of the good news is not an excuse. How do I know that? Well, I believe in sola scriptura, and so here we go. Verse 18 that Mariah read to us. For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who by their unrighteousness suppress the truth. So lots of revealing tonight. Can you put that next one up there? Carrie, lots of, the one that's got 17 and 18, lots of revealing here tonight. That the righteousness of God is revealed. Every time the righteousness of God is revealed, the wrath of God is revealed. Those are in consecutive verses so that we would pay attention to that. Every time the righteousness of God is revealed, the wrath is revealed. And then back up in 18, what is that word there? For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against, what's that word? All. All. Not some. All. And so the sulfur and fire of Sodom and Gomorrah is set against all sin, all people. There are wages to be paid. Wrath of God. Remember, as we studied in Jonah, we looked back at Sodom and Gomorrah and we talked about how God brought death judgment against those cities. Which brings up another question you may encounter out there. What keeps that from being murder? Some people didn't send sulfur and fire against these people. Why is the flood not murder? How does God? Let's get to it, right? If we're gonna surgically go into all the hard stuff, let's go all the way in. How does God stay holy in the midst of killing humans? Have you ever had that question? Inside you? Inside your brain? Think that question? There's nothing wrong with thinking that question. Well, let me answer it like this. The wrath of God is carrying out righteous judgment against sin. It is not murder if it is righteous. If it is, here's a good word for you, just. So you're going to have to get to know God. You have to read the Bible for all it's worth to be able to work that out in your mind. We know that the penalty of sin is death. Does God have, let me ask you this, does God have the right to say, what's the penalty against rebellion against me? Does he have the right to say it? Okay, not everybody would say that. That's why we have to have civil discourse if somebody disagrees with that, right? That's why we have to have conversation. That's why we have to be able to talk about those things. See, the Spirit has convinced you that God has the right to set the penalty against rebellion against him. But if he does have that right, he has the right to decide what that penalty is and when that penalty is executed. Because he's God. It is not murder because it is just. He said the penalty of sin is death. Has anybody ever been surprised that Adam and Eve were not killed immediately upon eating the fruit? Anybody? Did God not say, if you eat of that fruit, you will what? Surely die. Adam and Eve had to be a little shocked for a second. They didn't know what death was. They'd never seen it. But whatever it was, it should have come. Because I think they probably had seen God and known God well enough to believe that when he says he's going to do something, he's going to do it. Now, did they eventually die? Yes. Yes. Are they alive today? Yes. Will they see heaven or will they see hell? That depends. On before they died, they look forward to the cross, just like all the other Old Testament folks. See, this is just. This penalty, this carrying out wrath is just. That's why Jesus had to die. You understand that Jesus was born to die. He had to die. Justice was delivered. He took the penalty for death for his believers. Is anybody excited about that? I mean, like that's not any common little news. Because that death that's being talked about is not a physical one. That death is being talked about is a separation from God for all of eternity. So that's serious business. Surely you will die. If it was physical death, they would have died in the moment. That's not what God was talking about. God was talking about this death will happen where you will never be with me again. You're out, and you'll be out for the next, I don't know how long eternity is. A long time. See, the Father crushed his own Son for you and me so that we would not have to face that wrath. Without Jesus, the penalty of spiritual death following physical death is on all humans who by their sin suppress the truth about who God is. See, God doesn't send anybody to hell. He just lets those who have chosen to suppress the truth and ignore him slide in their continual slide away from him out of the garden. Doesn't have to send anybody anywhere. This place is hell. I mean, like if you think that you're protecting your best life now, heaven must suck. But the problem is that people do not take God seriously. Anybody ever hear a joke like this? Man, I would rather party in hell than sit on a cloud board worshiping God on a harp. I'm not really excited about the harp part either, just so you know. But how silly is that? This person must not have read about the flood or the fire or the sulfur or what hell is like. Basically what they do is they suppress the truth so they can stay in Rome. A lustful beast. I mean, let's admit it. Those of you that have been professional sinners like me in the room, Rome's fun for a minute, isn't it? You've got to be able to say that. But it's just for a minute. Because eventually it's like Rome. There's no good, there's no life, there's no love. It's hollow and it's destructive, shallow. Verse 19. Just in case we don't understand yet, Paul's going to finish the point. For what can be known about God is plain to them, all people, because God has shown it to them. For his invisible attributes, namely his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world in the things that have been made. So all people are without excuse. All people are without excuse. Well, that starts beautiful. That little 19 and 20 there starts beautiful. This idea that creation, anybody like doing this? You like getting off into nature? You like sitting on a beach? You like going to a mountain? You like to experience God and his creation. That's a fantastic thing. Let me read Psalm 19 for you. Maybe this will stir your affections about that. The heavens declare the glory of God, just like sunsets. Anybody else but me just like love sunsets. The heavens declare the glory of God, and the sky above proclaims his handiwork. Day to day pours out speech. Go sniff a newborn baby. Maybe not after they poop, but like, you know that like baby smell when there's no poop. Like, it's pouring out speech. This is saying God's invisible attributes are pouring out of those experiences. Pouring out of them. They reveal, night to night, they reveal knowledge. We are out without excuse. That is beautiful, and yet it's discouraging at the same time. No excuse. But think about it this way. If people were okay if they've never heard the gospel, why would we screw them up by taking it to them? Hey, Mr. Missionary Man, we were quite comfortable here in our little hut in the middle of nowhere, headed straight to heaven because we were just sitting here in our ignorance. You brought us the gospel, and now we have to believe in something we can't even fathom, or we go to hell. Thank you, Mr. Missionary Man. Is everybody tracking with what I'm saying here? The reason God sends us, listen, close. The reason God sends us, says we have got to get the gospel to those places, is those people have no hope except a dream or a vision. Without the preaching of the gospel, we must take them the gospel. They are without excuse and hellbound. You can argue with that. We can have civil discourse about that. I'm just telling you what God says in his word. God reveals his gospel everywhere. What it said is that we see that. We hear him speaking that I am so much more than what you're finding right now, but we're not seeking him because we love our sin. We love where we are. We are not seekers. This passage declares that simply experiencing life should drive us to seek Christ, even if we've never heard his name. Therefore, all men, all women are without excuse. You have to understand, I've preached those two lines before from Romans, and there was a parade of people just getting up and walking out. You know why they got up and walked out? It's because I was preaching something from the Bible that was in contradiction with the God they had created in their mind. Would I love it if it was some other way? Absolutely. Be a whole lot easier to preach some God that was really palatable for us because everybody gets in. At the end of the day, it's kind of like growing up in Little League now. Doesn't matter if you win 40 games or none, everybody gets a trophy. It would be nice if this was like that, but it's not. That's why Sola Scriptura is a close-fisted doctrine here at City on a Hill. We're not interested in letting people go thinking some way that is not the way it is. We'll let God determine who God is as revealed by the words And you need to work this out in your mind. If you're struggling with this, if you're a Christian, you take communion, or you just sit in your seats and pray tonight. Like sola scriptura means that we believe that God himself, by the power of the Holy Spirit, penned those words through Paul. And so that is so. We should all feel some angst that we have not been more involved with church planting and unreached people groups, because we've basically told all those unreached people groups they can go to hell. Just go to hell. But we believe this. And then there's the gracious side of this that says, I was an unreached people group. Captured in the depths of my sin. Anybody else in here marvel at the fact that you were a child of disobedience, a son or a daughter of disobedience, following the ways of this world, which means you were a follower of Satan? See, you'll never worship big until you realize just how depraved you were. See, I'm astonished that I was the unreached people group. The gospel was all around me, and I was suppressing the truth. Nobody went to church more than me. I had a drug problem. I was drugged to church like 3 or 4 times a week. But we suppress the truth. That's why God's grace is so amazing. We want nothing to do with it, and it comes and it gifts us with belief, and it gifts us with understanding of who Jesus is and what he has done, and we are saved by a righteousness outside of our own. We're saved by faith, and like I said before, the faith is not even our own. It's given to us. Here, I'm going to empower you so that you can believe. That's unbelievable mercy. That's unbelievable grace. We're gifted with that which we do not deserve. See, the diamond shines brightly against the black cloth because Jesus, if he can change me, he can change anyone. All evil to good. How about you? Dark and depraved. A son or a daughter of disobedience following the course of this world. He can change all evil to good. And you know what's really good news? Is at the end of the gospel, the end of this power of salvation message is that someday he will. All evil goes away. All sin goes away. All death goes away. And it's so simple. We make it so complicated. We argue over things that don't matter. And it's so simple. The gospel is simple. It is the power of salvation for those who will believe. So my question for you as you go to communion is, do you believe?